We're going to begin chapter 46. Chapter 46 is a very long chapter, and I intend this afternoon only to read the first part, partly because the first part of this chapter 46 of Nicholas Nickleby gives us the identity of the young lady with whom Nicholas is so passionately in love. So, the first part of chapter 46. After an anxious consideration of the painful and embarrassing position in which he was placed, Nicholas decided that he ought to lose no time in frankly stating it to the kind brothers. Availing himself of the first opportunity of being alone with Mr. Charles Cheeryble at the close of the next day, he accordingly related Smike's little history and modestly but firmly expressed his hope that the good old gentleman would, under such circumstances as he described, hold him justified in adopting the extreme course of interfering between parent and child, and upholding the latter in his disobedience, even though his horror and dread of his father might seem and would doubtless be represented as a thing so repulsive and unnatural as to render those who countenanced him in it fit objects of general detestation and abhorrence. So deeply rooted does this horror of the man appear to be, said Nicholas, that I can scarcely believe he really is his son. Nature does seem to have implanted in his breast one lingering feeling of affection, but surely nature can never err. My dear sir, replied Brother Charles, you fall into a very common mistake. The mistake of charging upon nature matters with which she has not the smallest connection, and for which she is in no way responsible. Men talk of nature as an abstract thing and lose sight of what it is naturally going to do. Here is a poor lad who has never felt a parent's care, who has scarcely known anything in his life but suffering and sorrow, presented to a man who is told is his father, and whose first act is to signify his intention of putting an end to his short term of happiness, of consigning him to his old fate, of taking him from the only friend he has ever had, which of course is yourself. If nature, in such a case, is to put that into the lad's breast, it would show her to be a liar and an idiot. Nicholas was delighted to find that the old gentleman spoke so warmly, and in the hope that he might say something more to the same purpose, made no reply. The same mistake presents itself to me in one shape or another at every turn, said Brother Charles. Parents who never showed their love complain of want of natural affection in their children. Children who never showed their duty complain of natural feeling in their parents. Lawmakers who find both so miserable that their affections have never had enough of life's sun to develop them, are loud in their moralizing over parents and children, and cry that the very ties of nature are disregarded. Natural affections and instincts, my dear sir, are the most beautiful of the Almighty's works, but, like other beautiful works of his, they must be reared and fostered, or it is as natural as they should be wholly obscured that the feelings should usurp their place, as it is that the sweetest productions of the earth, left untouched, should be choked by weeds and briars. I wish we could be brought to consider this, and, remembering natural obligations a little more at the right time, talk about them a little less at the wrong one. After this, Brother Charles, who had talked himself into a great heat, stopped to cool a little, and then continued. I dare say you are surprised, my dear sir, that I have listened to your recital with such little astonishment. That is easily explained. Your uncle has been here this morning. Nicholas coloured and drew back a step or two. Yes, yes, said the old gentleman, tapping his desk emphatically. Yes, he was here in this room. He would listen neither to reason, feeling, nor justice. But Brother Ned was hard upon him. Brother Ned, sir. Brother Ned might melt a paving stone. He came to, said Nicholas, to complain of you, of course, returned Brother Charles, to poison our ears with calumnies and falsehoods. But he came on a fruitless errand and went away with some wholesome truths in his ear besides. Brother Ned, my dear Mr. Nickleby, Brother Ned, he is a perfect lion. So is Tim Linkinwater. Tim Linkinwater is quite a lion. We had Tim in to face him at first, and Tim was at him. Oh, so he was, before you could say Jack Robinson. How can I ever thank you, sir, for all the deep obligations you impose upon me every day? Said Nicholas. By keeping silence upon the subject, my dear sir, returned Brother Charles. You shall be righted. At length, you shall not be wronged. Nobody belonging to you shall be wronged. They shall not hurt a hair of your head, or the boy's head, or your mother's head, or your sister's head. I have said it. Brother Ned has said it. Tim Linkinwater has said it. We have all said it, and we will all do it. I saw the man who claims to be the father. If he is the father, and I suppose he must be, he is a barbarian and a hypocrite, Mr. Nickleby. I told him, you are a barbarian, sir. I did. I said, you are a barbarian, sir. And I am very glad I said it. Very, very glad. I told him he was a barbarian, and very, very glad to have done so. By this time, Brother Charles was in such a very warm state of indignation that Nicholas thought he might venture to put in a word. But the moment he essayed to do so, Mr. Cheeryble laid his hand softly upon his arm and pointed to a chair. The subject is at an end for the present, said the old gentleman, wiping his face. Don't revive it by a single word. I am going to speak upon another subject, a confidential subject, Mr. Nickleby. We must be cool again. We must be cool. After 2 or 3 turns across the room, he resumed his seat, and drawing his chair nearer to that on which Nicholas was sitting, said, Young man, I am about to employ you, my dear sir, on a confidential and delicate mission. You might easily employ a more able messenger, sir, said Nicholas, but a more trustworthy and zealous one, I may be bold to say, you could not find. Of that I am well assured, returned his brother Charles. Well assured. You will give me credit for thinking so, and when I tell you that the object of this mission, you will be surprised. I hope not too surprised, that the object of this mission is a young lady. A young lady, sir? Cried Nicholas, quite trembling for the moment with his eagerness to hear more. A very beautiful young lady," said Mr. Cheeryble gravely. "Pray go on, sir," returned Nicholas. I'm thinking how to do so," said Brother Charles, sadly, as it seemed, as his young friend, with an expression allied to pain. You accidentally saw this young lady in this room one morning, my dear sir, in a fainting fit. Do you remember? Perhaps you have forgotten." "Oh, no," replied Nicholas hurriedly. I remember it very, very well." "She is the lady of whom I speak," said Brother Charles. Like the famous parrot, Nicholas thought a great deal, but was unable to utter a word. "She is the daughter," said Mr. Cheeryble, "of a lady who, when she was a beautiful young girl myself, and I was many, many years younger, it seems a strange word for me to utter now. She was a lady whom I loved very, very dearly. You will smile, perhaps, to hear a grey-headed man talk about such things. You will offend no one for whom, when I was a young man as you, I dare say I should have done the same." "I have no such inclination, sir, indeed," said Nicholas. "My dear brother Ned," continued Mr. Charles, "was to have married her sister, but she died. And she is dead too now, and has been for many years. She married the man of her choice, and I wish I could add that her after life was as happy as God knows I have ever prayed that it might be." A short silence intervened, which Nicholas made no effort to break. If trial and calamity had fallen as lightly on his head as in the deepest truth of my own heart I ever hoped for her sake it would, his life would have been one of peace and happiness, said the old gentleman calmly. It will be enough to say that this was not the case, that she was not happy, that they fell into complicated distresses and difficulties, that she came 12 months before her death to appeal to my old friendship, sadly changed, sadly altered, broken-spirited from suffering and ill usage, and almost broken-hearted. Her husband had readily availed himself of the money which, to give her but 1 hour's peace of mind, I would have poured out as freely as water. Nay, he often sent her back for more. And yet, even when he was squandering it, he made the very success of these, her applications to me, the groundwork of cruel taunts and jeers, protesting that he knew she thought with bitter remorse of the choice that she had made, and she had married him from motives of interest and vanity. Oh, he was a gay young man with many friends about him when she chose to marry him for her husband, and venting in short upon her by every unjust and unkind means the bitterness of that ruin and disappointment which he had brought about, he himself had brought about by his profligacy alone. In those times this young lady was a mere child. I never saw her again until that morning when you saw her also. But my nephew Frank— Nicholas started, and instinctively apologizing for the interruption, begged his patron to continue. My nephew Frank, I say, resumed Mr. Cheeryble, encountered her by accident and lost sight of her almost in a minute afterwards, within 2 days after he had returned to England. Her father lay in some secret place to avoid his creditors, reduced between sickness and poverty to the verge of death, and she a child, we might almost think, if we did not know the wisdom of all heaven's decrees, who should have blessed a better man with steadily braving privation, degradation, and every most terrible thing to such a young and delicate creature's heart, merely for the purpose of supporting her father. She was attended, sir, said Brother Charles, in these reverses, by one faithful creature, who had been in old times a poor kitchen wench in the family, who was then their solitary servant, but who might have been, for the truth and fidelity of her heart, who might have been the wife of Tim Linkinwater himself, sir. Brother Charles leant back in his chair and delivered the remainder of his story. In substance, it was this: that proudly resisting all offers of permanent aid and support from her late mother's friends, because they were made conditional upon her quitting the wretched man, her father, who had no friends left and was shrinking with instinctive delicacy from appealing to their behalf, to that true and noble heart which he hated and had, through its greatest and purest goodness, deeply wronged by misconstruction and ill report, this young girl had struggled alone and unassisted to maintain him by the labour of her hands. That through 2 long years, toiling by day and night, often by night, as a daily governess, to such caprices and indignities of women, with their daughters too often love to inflict upon their own, she had been compelled to seek out her mother's old friend, and with a bursting heart to confide in him at last. "If I had been poor," said Brother Charles, with sparkling eyes, "if I had been poor, Mr. Nickleby, my dear sir, which thank God I am not, I would have denied myself. Of course anybody would under such circumstances. The commonest necessities of life to help her. As it is, the task is a difficult one. If her father were dead, nothing would be easier, for then she could come and share and cheer the happiest home that Brother Ned and I could have, as if she were our child or our sister. But the wretched man is still alive. Nobody could help him. That has been tried 1,000 times. He was not abandoned by all without good cause, I know." "Can she not be persuaded to," Nicholas hesitated when he got that far, "to leave him?" said Brother Charles. "Who could entreat a child to desert her parent? Such entreaties, limited to seeing him occasionally, have been urged upon her, not by me, but always with the same result." "Is he kind to her?" said Nicholas. "Does he requite her affection?" "True goodness, considerate, self-denying kindness is not in his nature, sir," returned Mr. Cheeryble. "Such kindness as he knows, he regards her with, I believe. The mother was a gentle, loving, confiding creature, and although he wounded her from her marriage until her death as cruelly and as wantonly as a man ever did, she never ceased to love him. She commended him to her deathbed, on her deathbed, to her child's care, and her child has never forgotten it, and never will." "Have you no influence over him, sir?" asked Nicholas. "I, my dear sir? Oh, I am the last man in the world. Such is his jealousy and hatred of me, that if he knew his daughter had opened her heart to me, he would render her life miserable with his reproaches, although, this is the inconsistency and selfishness of his character, although if he knew that every penny she had came from me, he would not relinquish one personal desire that the most reckless expenditure of her scanty stock could gratify. He must be an unnatural scoundrel, said Nicholas indignantly. We will use no harsh terms, said Brother Charles, in a gentle voice, but will accommodate ourselves to the circumstances in which the young lady is placed. Such assistance as I have prevailed upon her to accept, I have been obliged, at her own earnest request, to dole out in the smallest portions, lest he, finding how easily money is procured, should squander it even more lightly than he has been accustomed to do. She has come to and fro, secretly and by night, to take even this, and I cannot bear that things should go on in this way, Mr. Nickleby. I really cannot bear it. Then it came out by little and little how that the twins had been revolving in their good old heads manifold plans and schemes for helping this young lady in the most delicate and considerate way, so that her father would not suspect the source whence the aid was derived, and how they had at last come to the conclusion that the best course to take would be make a feint, or pretending to, purchasing her little drawings and ornamental works at a high price, and keeping up a constant demand for the same, for the furtherance of which end and object it was necessary that somebody should represent the dealer in such commodities, and after great deliberation they had pitched upon Nicholas to support this character. He knows me, said Brother Charles. He knows my brother Ned. Neither of us would do. Frank is very good, a very fine fellow, but we are afraid that he might be a little flighty and thoughtless in such a delicate matter, and he might in short be too susceptible, for she is a beautiful creature, sir, just as her mother was. Falling in love with her before he well knows his mind can carry pain and sorrow into that innocent breast which we would rather be the humblest instruments of gradually making her happy. He took an extraordinary interest in her fortunes when he first happened to encounter her, and we gather from the inquiries we made of him that it was in her behalf that he made that turmoil which led your first acquaintance with him. Nicholas stammered out that he had long before suspected the possibility of such a thing, and in explanation of its having occurred to him, he described when and where he had seen the young lady herself. Well, then, you see, continued Brother Charles, as if he wouldn't do, my nephew wouldn't do, Tim in Linkinwater is out of the question, for Tim, sir, is such a tremendous fellow that he could never contain himself. He would go to loggerheads with the father before he had been in the place 5 minutes. You don't know what Tim Linkinwater is when he's roused, sir, by anything that appeals to his feelings very strongly. Then he is terrific, sir, is Tim Linkinwater, absolutely terrific. Now, in you we can repose the strictest confidence. In you we have seen, or at least I have seen, and that's the same thing, for there is no difference between me and my brother Ned, except that he is the finest creature that ever lived, and that there is not another and never will be anybody like him in all the world. In you we have seen domestic virtues and affections and delicacy of feeling which exactly qualify you for such an office. You are the man, sir. The young lady, sir, said Nicholas, who was so embarrassed that he could find no small difficulty in saying anything at all. Is she a party to this innocent deceit? Yes, yes, returned Mr. Cheeryble. At least she knows you come from us. She does not know, however, that we shall dispose of these little productions, which you'll purpose from time to time, and perhaps if you did it very well, that is, very well indeed, perhaps she might be brought to believe that we made a profit of them, eh? In this guileless and most kind simplicity, Brother Charles was so happy, and in this possibility of the young lady being led to think that she was under no obligation to him, he evidently felt so sanguine and had so much delight that Nicholas would not breathe a doubt upon the object.